Hello, good morning, good afternoon to everyone out there. Very nice of Tomorrow People for inviting me. And I'm very excited to kick off Tomorrow's People International Conference on Spirituality and Psychology. I'm speaking today on the integration of positive psychology and mindfulness to boost happiness in a Southeast Asian context. And I am Dr. Amoneeta, and I do want to acknowledge that there are special contributions from Gianna York in my presentation today. So again, I appreciate everybody tuning in out there. I'm excited to be a part of this great conference today. A little bit of my background: I am a positive multicultural counseling psychologist. I'm also a counselor, professor, researcher at Webster University here in Thailand. And I consider myself a mental health advocate, so really advocating for better mental health practices in the world. I also consider myself an ethical influencer. What that means is I look at ways that we can harness the power of psychology to help change behavior, help change attitudes, but in ethical and moral ways. And furthermore, I'm an author. So a little bit about my co-presenter, who unfortunately can't be here today, but contributed to this research and such. Her name is Gianna York. She also lives in Thailand. She is a children's mindfulness educator and mindfulness practitioner. She's also a mindfulness researcher and writer. She's recently published a book for children called U is for Understanding, Claire's Journey Toward Mindfulness. This is a really fun and interactive way of introducing mindfulness to children in kind of ways that they can follow along Claire's journey as she goes through challenges in her life, and then she kind of uses the mindfulness that she learned at school. Gianna has a passion for teaching students how to reduce anxiety and self-regulate while being in the present moment. That's her book, just as a cover, not necessarily trying to promote it, but just to let you know. And then I'm also not kind of shamelessly promoting our book, but just to let you know that most of today's presentation comes out of this book that Gianna and I wrote called The Vowels of Mindfulness. It's a guidebook for teachers, parents, counselors, and caregivers. It's currently under review with a publisher, so hopefully will be available soon. So most of today comes out of this book. So first off, I know a lot of you are probably already familiar with this term. I see there's other presenters at this very conference talking on positive psychology, but just a background a little on positive psychology, the first topic of my presentation, right? The field dedicated to the strength, human strengths and the science of happiness, right? So rather than looking at a pathology model as traditional psychology generally does, we are looking at a strengths model, things that are going well, what helps people be resilient. And so definitely things like mindfulness fit into this, right? So we're doing this shift from that traditional kind of medical pathology disorder mentality from traditional psychology to kind of what's going right with people, this more positive strength-based approach, right? So the rationale for my presentation is that psychology has really been criticized for limited perspectives about and applicability to non-weird cultures, right? A lot of you are already familiar that most of our research comes out of kind of Euro-American, undergraduate, educated, rich, Western kind of industrialized populations. Positive psychology has also had these types of criticisms. So therefore, what we want to say is that modifications to positive psychology practices are warranted to be culturally appropriate, to apply these practices to other cultures, to apply interventions to other cultures. And then I'm proposing this idea that given this strong influence of Eastern religions and spirituality, very much in line with our current conference theme, in many parts of Southeast Asia, mindfulness, which does have some origins in Buddhism, I think has a potential for increasing, for really boosting the happiness in these regions. So that's my proposal, and I'm certainly open to discussion with other folks if you all have kind of insider information about the Southeast Asian area to tell me if this idea is valid and if we could utilize that. All right. So next, the next factor is mindfulness, right? Simply put, obviously, there's a lot written on it and lots to think about and talk about with mindfulness. But simply put, it is paying attention in a particular way, on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmentally. If you followed along with Vladimir's, the host's introduction video there, he led us through a little bit of mindfulness, of just kind of being present and being aware in the moment there. All right. So taking mindfulness and positive psychology and kind of marrying them together, that's going to equal increased happiness. So we have some evidence that mindfulness fits quite nicely with the ideas behind positive psychology, because it has potential to decrease depression and anxiety. And the obvious result of that would be feeling happier if you weren't as depressed or anxious. Mindfulness can also lead to greater self-compassion, optimism, and empathy. Furthermore, it's been associated with physical health benefits. So all of these factors, if we are able to increase things like physical health, decrease depression, increase self-compassion, optimism, we're more likely to have potential to boost our happiness. And so that's definitely what I think a lot of us are interested in, certainly what I've dedicated a lot of my research to. So furthermore, we find that practicing mindfulness is likely to boost self-compassion, self-efficacy, meaning, and autonomy in our lives. Again, other factors that we know are correlated with happiness. Mindfulness can also contribute to our resilience, this ability to kind of recuperate after adverse events or possibly even during events, right? This peritraumatic growth that we might be experiencing. So obviously definitely relevant to all of us living through the current global pandemic. This ability to kind of recuperate for these types of situations. Now, since mindfulness has been recognized for its physical and psychological benefits, it has even been integrated into some positive psychology therapies. That's one of the things I do as a counseling psychologist, is I do therapy, and I often do positive psychology interventions, and I also do some practice of mindfulness in those interventions. So definitely I've seen kind of anecdotally this marrying of positive psychology and mindfulness as being effective for many of my clients. So more boosts to happiness of practicing mindfulness. It improves emotional regulation and focus. These are very big predictors of success. And of course, there are many ways to measure success and such, but in general, one of the ways of measuring success is if you yourself subjectively believe that you're successful, and that oftentimes is not necessarily exactly what kind of society might say in terms of monetary and physical success. But there can be many ways to measure that success. And one of the ways would be having good emotional regulation and focus, becoming more relaxed and calm. It can give you a boost in creativity and self-esteem. It can give you better social skills, improved self-awareness, being able to remember things better, improved mood and mental health indices, as I mentioned before, kind of less depression, less stress, and anxiety. So all of these things combined can really boost happiness if you become a kind of a regular practicer of mindfulness. So I'm going to say, and I think that there's other researchers out there that also support this idea that I cite here, that we can combine positive psychology and mindfulness to not only increase an individual's happiness, but also provide for a greater and more positive and happier society and a better place to live for most of us. So Zhu says if we combine mindfulness with positive psychology, it can kind of make us superhumans. And part of this idea of being superhuman is what he says is that we're more likely to contribute positively to society and survive. So you can imagine, right? We're going to have less crime and less distress and less conflict, etc., if people tend to feel happier and more at peace with themselves and with others. There's also growing evidence that mindfulness can contribute to many of those core positive psychology indices that contribute to a better society. So again, if we're feeling better, we're going to have a better society, and that's what a lot of us, I think, involved in this conference and otherwise are interested in. So now let's take this a little bit further and apply it to a particular kind of region. As you know from my title, I'm talking about Southeast Asia and how it might be applicable to using positive psychology in this region. So I ask you all this question. Shouldn't Southeast Asians be happier now than they were 50 years ago, right? If you look at it, we have a lot more luxuries in this region. We have people that have the luxuries of driving cars and smartphones and air conditioning and kind of generally having more access to things, right? They have convenience stores and all kinds of things that kind of makes life easier as compared to many people that might have been rice farmers, for example, 50 years ago, right? But the truth is it's not. In Thailand and Vietnam, in China, and many of these countries around, the lifestyle has actually gotten more and more modern, but actually on average, the happiness in many of these countries has gone down. We call this the happiness paradox because people are often less happy despite having increased wealth and increased affluence for a lot of them. So there are some contributions to this increased rate of depression across this region. Many people are reporting more stress, more anxiety. A lot of these things are associated with our modern lifestyle, right? Less exercise, being more overweight, more people living alone, more people feeling lonely without those intimate social connections. And we know that loneliness can have devastating effects on people's mental and physical health. Also, vitamin D deficiency, right? People aren't getting enough sunlight and enough light. Partially in this region, people are kind of have this social, cultural aspect of, you know, lighter skin, white, this colonized view of being more beautiful, right? And so here in Thailand, where I'm at, depending on what study you look at, some 36 to 61% of Thai people have been found deficient in vitamin D, despite being one of the sunniest countries in the world, right? Furthermore, there's more consumption of caffeine and other stimulants, which ends up having people insufficient for sleep. And so all of these things can contribute to depression and detract from happiness, right? Just having insufficient sleep can actually mimics what a depression looks like. So yeah, absolutely. A lot of these things can contribute. So I think that this quote by Ilardi is quite apt for this idea, right? In our modern world, humans were actually never designed for the poorly nourished, sedentary, right, sitting indoor, sleep deprived, socially isolated, frenzied pace of the 21st century life. So we're actually, evolutionarily speaking, not designed to live in this kind of modern life. So this becomes my proposal then. So let's combine mindfulness and positive psychology to treat depression and increase happiness in Southeast Asia. As I brought up before, I'm definitely open to discussion because I'm not from this region. I don't want to superimpose my Western ideas and values on everybody, but I'm open to this discussion from others on whether y'all think that mindfulness, given its Buddhist origins, is appropriate for utilizing with this more Western concept of positive psychology in order to, again, decrease depression and happiness in Southeast Asia. These are some of the things that I propose. These are not my ideas and they're not rocket science. Basically, Ilardi came up with a 6 habits program to beat depression without drugs. And he tested this. They tested it multiple times and went head to head with antidepressant drugs. And people with depression had much better outcomes on changing these simple kind of lifestyle habits called the therapeutic lifestyle change, much, much better than taking the antidepressant drugs. So the ideas here would be to eat well, to exercise, to socialize, to get natural light exposure and sunlight. It doesn't have to be much, 5 to 10, 15 minutes, a couple of times a week. Decrease this rumination, kind of overthinking, and improve sleep quality. Well, I want to take Ilardi's proposal one step further and say that all of these things can be done mindfully. You can increase your happiness, decrease depression by practicing these things mindfully. Mindfully eat. Think about mindfully exercise. Think about how you feel if you do exercise and eat well or you don't, right? Mindfully choose the healthy relationships. Do a little bit of breathing and being present in the moment in the natural daylight or in the sunlight for 10 minutes. Mindfulness actually has scientific evidence that it can decrease this overthinking and rumination. And of course, it can help you relax and sleep better and be able to get that quality benefits. All right. So there are certainly some implications for mental health practitioners like myself, right? We can provide psychoeducation about the benefits of combining mindfulness and positive psychology and how that can boost happiness. We can certainly do our practices, our therapeutic practices, as I mentioned before, right? By kind of supporting attitude and behavior change to help people change those habits and support them and what the things might be getting in the way of those. And then, of course, there are implications for policymakers. I want to encourage policymakers to fund research that benefits society, that's going to increase the general happiness and well-being, decrease the conflict of people in general, and be able to support these questions about whether mindfulness and positive psychology can and indeed boost happiness, as I propose. Also, we'd like funding and support for policies and programs that support being mindfully happy. So those are some of the implications. Some future directions. I bring up this question, and we need to test it like we do in psychology. We need empirical evidence, right? So we had that question of, does combining mindfulness with positive psychology actually increase happiness in culturally appropriate ways in Southeast Asia, not just in general, but in culturally appropriate ways? We need to design empirical, quantitative, and qualitative longitudinal studies in order to answer this question. And then we need to integrate programs into our educational institutions and then evaluate the effectiveness like we do in psychology. And if it's not effective, then we will then reevaluate and adjust. So to sum up, I believe that we can improve society through these ideas of mindfulness and positive psychology. So let's teach it in schools and universities. Many schools in Asia already realize the benefits of mindfulness and either teach mindfulness or meditation as part of their curriculum and or integrate it throughout their schools. So I'm saying, let's normalize it. Let's standardize it. Let's have it in all of our schools. Let's get the heads of our schools recognizing the benefits. Let's shower them with empirical evidence to get this more normalized, which is what our book is all about. It's about getting mindfulness into schools with the young people and positive psychology so that they can start these practices very early. So further ways we would say integrating this combination of positive psych and mindfulness into schools is likely to have many benefits, like improving academics, encouraging a growth mindset, and boosting happiness. So leaders of schools will be sure to be interested in those. So in sum, if we scientifically design mindfulness-based positive psychology interventions, then we have a great potential to make Southeast Asians happier and overall improve society, which I think we're all interested in doing. So let's do this. Join with me. I want to thank you all for your attention. I want to thank you for listening and being part of this. Feel free to reach out to me. You can follow me on Instagram if you're not one of my students, and otherwise on LinkedIn. You can look at my website there or send me an email. So I'm definitely interested in collaborating and hearing more from you all. So excellent. Thank you again for following, and we will talk with you later. Have a great conference.
We do have time for one question, if anybody has a question. Excellent presentation. Going once, going twice. All right, we'll see everybody on the next presentation. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you all.